So this all began with a piece of 160 OD drainage pipe, which I then ripped down in the ripsaw to take about 80 mm off the thickness. And now I've taped it together, and I know it's going to spring apart once the tape is off, so now I'm just using my torch to soften the sides. Probably would have been better if I'd have used a more broad flame for this, but it worked out pretty well in the end. As you can see, certainly burning the tape, and I just went step by step around this fairly carefully to get it so that it would hold its shape. It's looking good, actually. And now I'm about to cut the foam, and these are all of the sections that I want to make, both for the bow and for the stern, thus the S and the B. And this is now my little homemade foam cutter that you've probably seen many times on the work that I do. And I've just cut these in accordance with the plan. The result is, as you can see now, I've made my own little jig arrangement to cut these. And what's really quite nice is that there's a slight angle on that wire, which means that they taper, all of them taper in a very nice way. Works quite well. So we're going to use the discovered method, which means that all of this foam is going to be melted away with petrol when I get that far. And I've used this once before. I used it on the U-boat, and my experience with that suggested to me it would work quite well here again, but this time I am in fact going to make one specific change, which you will see when we get to it, because the U-boat interior is really a bit of a mess, and I don't want this to be the same. So now, taking the tape off, just coming to see how this is going to look, if it's going to spring apart. And the result is that it's holding together quite nicely. Good enough what I want, and I'm going to make sure that that seam is along the keel. Now this is the piece that I ripped out lengthwise, and I'm just now using the PVC glue to glue that into the base internally, clamping it down with a piece of wood, sort of making this up as we go along a bit. I just want this thing to hold together, and that's as rough as you can get, but it's actually pretty darn good. Now we're putting, this is a bit of overkill, but I do want this at the right angle, so I'm just putting a nice hole through the middle of each of these pieces of foam. I've noticed that the ends of this pipe are not perfectly circular, so I figured, why not fix it? So here's a piece of ply with exactly the right shape, and it's got a cut in one side so that it will spring around the pipe. And that's a really good way of holding it while I just put some extra heat on. Interesting thing is I could see that it just expanded out to fill that hole as I put the heat on, and it's a really good way of making that nice and square. Nice and round, I mean. So if you're going to do this, this is a good idea. So now I'm going to glue these in, and I'm using, I call it the shashlick method, in that I've got a piece of dowel I'm going to run through the whole thing, and I'm just using wood glue for the whole process. This is white glue. Obviously it becomes liquid when you put water on it. fairly irrelevant in this process, but anything stronger will have an effect on the foam itself, the styrene. So I do need this to be nice and bland. I'm just using the set square here to make sure this is square before we start creating the shashlick. But I'm going to let this dry first. Always worth doing good preparation like this, and this is good. Tacking it now with some hot glue. Once again, that's benign to the foam, works really well. So it's hard now, and we're just making the shashlick. I think this is the stern. It's going to be longer. It was one piece longer in total. Yeah. Okay, honey. Okay. So there it is, the dry shashlick, ready to become a submarine. So I'm now using my hand sander directly on the foam, very gently, just to get the appropriate shape into the bow and the stern. Of course, what I want here isn't the exact shape of the hull, I want the shape of the space on the inside. So that's how it looks. I think that's pretty good. I think that's a good start. So this is the new idea. It's to use wood glue and paste in place aluminium foil. This is before we put the fiberglass on. This seemed to be a good idea, and in fact it turned out to be a complete winner. Normally with foam, obviously you have to seal it before you use the fiberglass. Otherwise the fiberglass will destroy the foam. So one way around that is to use some acrylic paint, which once again is benign to the foam. But what I'm doing here is using first a layer of alfoil, straight from the kitchen. Doesn't matter if it crinkles a bit. All you want to do is get a nice solid cover. And here it is. Looks rather disgusting somehow, but there we have it. And I've now got some white acrylic paint, and I'm going to give that a coat as well. Probably didn't need to do this, but not a bad idea. I'm trying to get that paint straight into that join there, because I'm a bit concerned about that. And here that was actually fiberglass, and I've put the first piece of fiberglass on, and now painting the fiberglass onto the surface. I always use cheap brushes for this and throw them away each time. Okay, look at that. That's now in place and solid. That first band was quick drying, And if anywhere was going to be affected, it was going to be the where the resin touched the foam here. But that's done now. I can now complete the process. And this is great. So I'm going to get to work now and finish off the fiberglassing with 2 coats, I think. And that's it. Looking extraordinary.